Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Horizon House Election Forum on the Secretary of State. I'm Laura Weese. I'm the co-chair of the Election Forums Committee at Horizon House, along with Sam Sperry. And we want to welcome everybody tonight. Thanks to Julie Anderson for being here with us tonight. She'll be responding to questions prepared by our residents and presented by moderator Doris Ray. We received word last week that due to a recent schedule change, Steve Hobbs would not be able to participate in this forum. Later, I will read a statement from him. Some background about the office. Our previous Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, a Republican, was elected for a 4-year term in 2020, but resigned last year to serve in the Biden administration. Governor Inslee appointed Steve Hobbs, a state senator and Democrat, who has held the office since last November. The election this year is for the remaining 2 years of the Secretary's term. And I want to correct an error that was on the flyer that residents of Horizon House received this week. It had photos of both candidates. I don't know if you can see them. And also after their names, in parentheses, their party affiliation. For Steve Hobbs, it says Democrat. For Julie Anderson, it says independent, and that's not correct. The correct term is nonpartisan. So please, if you have your flyer with you, cross out independent and write nonpartisan. And I'm very sorry about that mistake. So the Office of Secretary of State was established with the adoption of the Washington State Constitution in 1889. The Secretary is elected every 4 years and is second in line of succession to the governor after the lieutenant governor. The office provides an annual salary of $116,950 and employs 290 people statewide. A mission statement for the Secretary calls for preserving the integrity of elections in Washington State. Our Secretary of State oversees elections in collaboration with Washington's 39 counties and their election officials. Each county operates voter registration, voting, and vote counting under the authority and supervision of the Secretary of State. The Secretary certifies the results of all elections and declares the results as official. In addition to oversight of elections, our Secretary of State has other important responsibilities. I'll mention 5. 1, registering private corporations, limited partnerships, and trademarks. 2, preserving historical records of the state and making those records available for research. 3, administering the state's address confidentiality program for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. 4, registering individuals, organizations, and commercial fundraisers involved in charitable solicitations. And 5, fostering international trade in collaboration with other state officials. Now, it's my pleasure to turn the microphone over to our moderator, Doris Ray. Doris?
Thank you, Laura. As Laura has explained, Steve Hobbs, one of the 2 candidates scheduled to participate in this evening's forum for Secretary of State candidates, is unable to be here because of recent scheduling changes in his campaign. However, we're happy that the other candidate, Julie Anderson, is with us. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
We'll be presenting the forum as planned with only a slight modification. The candidates have been asked to make a 3-minute opening statement, which includes answering a response to a question that they were sent. The question was, what unique quality, skill, or experience do you possess that makes you the best candidate for this position? We will begin with an opening statement by Julie Anderson, followed by a written statement from Steve Hobbs, which will be read by Laura Weese. After the opening statement, I will ask questions which have been prepared by Horizon House residents. And Julie, you will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Then at the end of the question and answer period, Julie, candidate Anderson, will have 3 minutes for a closing statement. So Julie, your opening statement. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much. Well, my name is Julie Anderson, and I am the nonpartisan candidate for Secretary of State. I'm also the candidate for Secretary of State who has nearly 13 years of professional hands-on experience conducting hundreds of elections, recording, preserving, and making accessible millions of public records, and licensing businesses. All, as you heard from our moderators, very relevant to the office of the Secretary of State. I was raised in a military family, Air Force, so my roots in public service and hard work run pretty darn deep. Before I became the Pierce County Auditor, where I got all of that elections experience, I had an eclectic career. I've served in the private, nonprofit, and public sectors in human services, criminal justice, and economic development. And I was elected twice to the Tacoma City Council, another nonpartisan position, and my first foray into elected service. I am running for Secretary of State for a few reasons. One, I think that the office must be nonpartisan. It needs to be politically neutral. The chief elections officer who's responsible for overseeing elections and certifying the results shouldn't belong to a team. That's a lot like having an umpire at home plate wearing one of the team jerseys. And when I explain that to third graders and fifth graders, you should see the looks on their faces. It just makes sense. I feel so strongly about this that I'm running without asking or receiving the endorsements of any political party, nor am I soliciting or accepting any contributions from a political party. 95% of my contributions are coming from individuals. I'm looking forward to being Secretary of State to increase access to democracy, as well as improving transparency and security. And by the way, we can do both of those things. They're not mutually exclusive. I've got a lot of practical ideas to that effect on my website. And if you want to snoop around, go to julieanderson.org. Since I launched the campaign, my policy plans have been in writing, and they haven't changed. And it doesn't matter who I'm addressing. I'm always open to new ideas, but the campaign plans that you see before you on that website have not changed. So I'm looking forward to good questions and bring it on.
Thank you, Julie. And now Laura will read a statement sent to us from Steve Hobbs' campaign office. Laura?
All right, this is Steve Hobbs' statement. As your new Secretary of State, I humbly ask for your support in this critical election. Since accepting Governor Inslee's appointment to this office, it has been an exciting time for Washington State. Along with being the first Democratic office holder in this position since 1965, I am also the first person of color to serve in this role. I arrive at this historic moment with a deep sense of humility for those who shaped my journey, especially my own mother, who came to this country with nothing as an immigrant from Japan. The sacred right to vote is an integral part of our democracy, and no one will fight harder to protect this right. The role of Secretary of State has changed in recent years. In addition to the executive experience required to oversee an agency of 300 dedicated staff, the office requires steadfast commitment to ensuring our elections remain safe and secure. As your Secretary of State, I am the only candidate with experience as a bipartisan negotiator in the state legislature, experience as a task force commander during the pandemic, and experience overseeing state elections, corporations, charities, archives, and libraries. These qualifications are imperative for a state executive in this demanding role. As your Secretary of State, my office has focused on 3 core priorities: cybersecurity of our election systems, combating dangerous misinformation, and promoting voter outreach and equity across our state. At this critical time, when free and fair elections need to be safeguarded and our accountability and transparency need to be at highest level, I would be honored to earn your support to continue this important work.
Thank you, Laura. That concludes the opening statements. Now we will move to questions submitted by Horizon House residents. I will read the questions, and a slide with the text will be projected on the screen. An on-screen warning sign will alert you when you have 15 seconds remaining, and if necessary, you will get a final sign to finish, please. First question. Do you support Washington's vote by mail system? Explain your answer. Julie?
Yes, I do support Washington State's election laws. Washington State's vote by mail tradition is an excellent one. It's auditable, it's secure, and it's convenient. I presided over polling place elections and vote by mail elections. And I can tell you that the most secure and orderly election method is vote by mail, which is entirely paper-based and brought to a central count facility where the IT security can be monitored and controlled by professional employees. I also support vote by mail because of the ease of access. It's not the Wild West. We're not mailing ballots out willy-nilly. There's a lot of controls, voter verification, and security involved in who we mail ballots to and how they get counted. But it is extremely convenient for the majority of voters, and Washingtonians want to keep it.
Thank you, Julie. If, as Secretary of State, you receive credible advance information that election deniers are planning to disrupt voting and/or vote counting in one or more Washington counties. Question 2, what steps would you take to prevent any activities from whatever source from disrupting the standard and timely process of fair voting and vote counting from taking place?
Number 1, I'm going to call Homeland Security. I'm a trusted partner with Homeland Security, the FBI, and the other alphabet agencies that are under that umbrella. We have a well organized communication system, and I know exactly how to report problems to them. Then they can be working on the investigative side and bringing in their security apparatus, while I, number two, alert the county auditors and tell them what I know so that they can begin working with their local law enforcement to do whatever is called for, whether that's reinforcements, target hardening, whatever the counties need. It depends on what the threat is, right? And then three, I'm immediately going to activate community networks along with the county auditors of local media and community organizations, so that if there's any misinformation or disinformation that's fueling this activity, that we can get the word out and get good facts on the street. So initiate a community communication program, work with Homeland Security, and work with county auditors so they can get their local law enforcement involved.
Thank you. In the state of Washington, the Secretary of State does not send, we'll hold for a moment on the question. I'm going to give a little background here. In the state of Washington, the Secretary of State does not send out any ballots and does not count any ballots. That is the job of the locally elected county auditors in 38 counties and the elected election director in King County. The relationship between secretaries of state with local election officials in some states is toxic. So, question number 3, how would you handle the relationship between the Secretary of State and the 39 county election officials?
Well, first of all, the Secretary of State has an oversight role. So I certify the election results that are conducted by county auditors. This is one reason why my hands-on experience conducting hundreds of elections is incredibly important. I will often be in a position of having to tell county auditors something that they don't want to hear. It may be a new rule that needs to be imposed. It may be changes to the training and certification program that we run. But it's telling that over 40 election officials, former and current in Washington state, have endorsed my candidacy as Secretary of State. Not because we always agree, but because they trust my leadership, even when we do disagree. I'm highly communicative and very transparent. The election officials who have endorsed me are Republicans, they're Democrats, and they're nonpartisans and independents. So I would continue the relationship that Kim Wyman and Sam Reed have nurtured and established, which is by being firm, fair, friendly, and consistent.
Thank you. What election reforms, if any, would you propose? For example, what about alternative methods of voting, such as proportional representation, ranked choice voting, approval voting, etc.?
Well, I've written quite a bit of this on my website, julieanderson.org. I am famous, if you will, for supporting the local option bill for ranked choice voting that's been kicking around in the state legislature for about 6 years now. I support that because communities are asking for it, and it is gaining momentum every year, and we need to be proactive and be prepared for it. One of the reasons that ranked choice voting holds so much promise is that that's the method of balloting you would use for proportional representation. And the bill being proposed would allow RCV to be used for proportional or multi-member districts. And there's lots of benefits to it that I have written about on my website. Be clear, though, I'm not proposing that ranked choice voting should be applied statewide. What I'm advocating for is allowing local communities who want to try this to try it, but I want to standardize it and make sure that it's successful.
The Secretary of State is the protector of important public records. Next question. What is your view on protecting and ensuring public access to our state government's records?
First, I'm a state certified public records officer. So the Public Records Act and the preservation of documents and making them accessible is extremely important to me, and I'm very passionate about it. The Secretary's office has a very unique role. We manage the state archives, which preserves and makes accessible all of the government documents that have permanent retention value in local and state government. That's back from the territorial days to all the stuff that's being created today. I am wanting to modernize the office. It has a legacy of being very paper-based, but government is producing records at breakneck speed in the highest volumes ever with documents that have never been a piece of paper. They're digitally native. Are we prepared to intake that wide variety of formats, preserve them, and make them accessible to you? That's what I'm going to be focused on with the state archives. I can tell you that I think that it's an important role to hold government accountable by preserving records and making them accessible to you.
Thank you. Let me say that I skipped a question. We have these numbered between what I'm reading and what my colleague is putting on the screen. So we will go ahead now to question 7, and that is essentially one that you have answered before, but perhaps you have something to add. Should the office of Secretary of State in Washington be nonpartisan? Why or why not?
To expand on my prior answer, the office of the Secretary of State is ministerial in nature. It's executive. The office follows the law. It doesn't create law. This isn't a legislative position. So belonging to a party, in my personal opinion, doesn't add value to how you do the job, but it does add quite a bit of suspicion. Also, I don't see how you can accept money from a political party and be bankrolled by a political party and then say that you don't belong to that team. Groups are good. That's how you get things done, both in sports teams and in cities and towns. But I think the Secretary of State should not belong to a team. There is a growing body of evidence that this is going to, that states around the United States are going to be looking at this. And I will be the first nonpartisan secretary elected in the United States in 100 years. It's well overdue.
Good, thank you. I am going back to the question number 5, which says, what should be done about the spread of purposeful deception about elections and election results?
More good facts. I don't think it's effective to tell people to shut up and sit down. People that are spreading bad facts rarely are listening to government anyway. So I think that what we have to do is put good information into the environment, and again, to work with community members, because government speech has limited utility. The people that are listening to government are not part of the problem. It's people that are listening to alternative channels. So we need to have strong relationships with community organizations of all kinds, and develop relationships with them and provide them with good information so they can be the people educating their neighbors, etc. I don't think it's a good idea to criminalize speech. And I know that that's not necessarily a popular position, but I do think that's a slippery slope, and I don't want to be involved in criminalizing speech.
Thank you. Question number 8. Is registration in this state easily available to all voters eligible to register? And is it convenient and secure? What changes, if any, do you propose?
Well, I do think that we have a very good registration system in Washington State. Yes, I believe it's convenient, it's easy, and it's accessible. The vast majority of registrations in Washington State are through the Motor Voter Program, which is anytime you interact with the Department of Motor Vehicles. And that's where I would focus some improvements, because the Department of Motor Vehicles we depend a lot on them for their customer service and accuracy. So I would propose more investments in the Department of Licensing and also ask them to capture more information at the point of registration. There is discussion about, we already have automatic registration in Washington State, but there are proposals to increase that even further. I just want to make sure that the clerks at the Department of Motor Vehicles aren't making decisions about who's eligible to vote and who isn't. That's up for the voter to decide and for election administrators on the back end to verify.
Thank you. What would you do to help voters become better informed about candidates and issues on the ballot?
Oh, that's tough. It's tough because the Secretary of State needs to be neutral and not be campaigning. So I would have to be very careful about what information I was providing to voters because it gets very close to picking and choosing and campaigning. That's why we have state and local voter pamphlets that have adopted rules that are approved by the state legislature. I think that maybe making the voter pamphlet more interactive, so the digital version that we have with more hot links. I think everybody here knows what a hot link is. When you're online and you see that blue bar, you can touch it and be taken to another location. I think that for the online voter pamphlet, we could make it more interactive like that so that it's faster for voters to do research.
Thank you. The next question, what will you emphasize as you represent Washington in international trade and cultural missions abroad and host foreigners who visit Washington in return?
Well, of course, I want to emphasize all of Washington State's natural attributes. So I'm thinking about agriculture, technology, and aerospace. But let me take a step back. That has actually been a feature of the Secretary of State's office that has diminished a little bit over time. If you follow the news, you may know that the Lieutenant Governor's office has really taken the helm when it comes to international trade. And you heard in my opening that I haven't a background in economic development. I was a senior policy advisor in the State Department of Commerce. So I know that economic development and trade is a very busy space with lots of players. You've got local and regional economic development boards, chambers of commerce, agricultural associations, the Lieutenant Governor, the State Department of Commerce, and the Governor's office all playing in that space. I think my job is going to be making sure that I'm adding value and not getting in the way. But you can count on me to be extraordinarily diplomatic and receive guests very well. You can also count on me to make sure that nobody's missing from the table. For example, our tribal nations, I want to make sure that they're invited on international trade missions as well, and that they're prepared to receive visitors.
Thank you. Our last question is one that you have touched on a couple of minutes ago, so you may still have something to add to it. Do you have any proposals in addition to what you have mentioned on how to improve the state voters pamphlet?
The only other thing that I would add is that the county auditors have written and proposed a bill that didn't pass in the last session, and we're going to propose it again in this session, and that is to make the rules uniform between state candidates and local candidates. So they're playing by the same rules of speech. It's very confusing to have it acceptable for one candidate to say something and another candidate to not be able to say something.
Thank you. That concludes our question and answer session. And now to Julie Anderson's 3-minute closing statement. Julie? I
don't think I'm going to take 3 minutes. We covered a lot in those questions. I want to emphasize again that I'm supported by a wide variety of people who know me and trust me because they've worked alongside me, not because we agree all the time, but because they know that whenever we need to be disagreeable, I'll be transparent and fact-based and balanced and neutral, politically neutral. I am looking forward to expanding access in Washington State. Please check out my website, julieanderson.org, where you can learn more about how in Pierce County, we used our public libraries to make 27 of our library branches accessible to the public and extensions of our office on Election Day. If we took an idea like that, and I plan to, we could have up to 300 library branches in Washington State accessible to voters on Election Day. In Pierce County, on average, the voters save 14 miles if they're having an emergency on Election Day. I'm also looking forward to increasing transparency and security easily without making things harder on voters. For example, having a statewide risk limiting audit. Right now we have audits at the county level, which are very good, but they're not statistically significant samples of ballots, and we're not all testing the same thing. So we're going to keep the local audit, but overlay that, at least in state elections, with one single risk limiting audit that has a statistically valid p-value. I also want to stand up, and I'm going to need the legislature's help on this, a nonpartisan observer corps. Right now, only the two political parties have rights to observe elections. And I don't think that it's just the political parties that are interested in democracy and free and fair elections. So I want to work with colleges, especially the community and technical colleges, but also four-year universities, to find subject matter experts, people that are getting degrees in cybersecurity, people who are getting degrees in accounting or law, for example, to be trained and to help us make observations about our elections to make them better, and also to apply that third eye to boost our integrity. I think I'm just going to be quiet now, and I thank you for your time. It was a pleasure to be able to speak with you, and I only wish that I had been able to see the people that posed those questions. Don't hesitate to contact me. My email is julie@julieanderson.org. And for those of you watching who want to have a conversation with me, here's my cell phone, 253-281-5785.
Thank you, Julie Anderson, not only for participating in this forum, but also for your public service and your willingness to be a candidate for office. Our democracy depends on qualified citizens being willing to run and to serve. Thank you again. I now return to Laura Weese.
Thank you, Doris, and thank you, Julie. I echo Doris's sentiments about your willingness to run for public office in a time like this, and all the years of public service you've already put in. So it's great having you. I want to say something about the state ballot issues. There's not too much to be said. You have 2 advisory votes on your ballot this year. And as you know from the past, they're non-binding. The legislature is required to put these advisory votes on the ballot anytime the legislature raises taxes without a vote of the people. And this was a Tim Eyman initiative in 2007, so perhaps it will go away one of these days. I want to recognize the Horizon House residents who helped put on this forum. Doris Ray, our very excellent moderator, Adele Reynolds, our timekeeper, and Bobby Spaeth, who was her backup, Jenny Simpson, who created and managed the slides, John Clement, who helped to contact the candidates, Sue Vadman and Roger Lead, who worked on publicity. And as ever, thanks to Risa Ransom, who is our technical director tonight. She is the director of events and programs at Horizon House. But at the end here, I want to say thanks to the audience, because you are the ones with the power of the vote who have the important decisions to make. So the ballots are going to be mailed out next week and have to be postmarked by November 8th. But it is in your hands, and I wish you well. Thanks so much and good night.